Welcome to the GTN Show. In this week's show, we wrap up all the action from the T100 in Ibiza, the World Triathlon Championship Series in Weihai, China, plus the bike count numbers in from the IRONMAN World Championships in Nice. And we have some On running shoes to give away. Well, there doesn't seem to be a lot happening in the world of triathlon, at least not as far as news goes from the industry. There seems to be a bit of a deep breath by the industry in between the IRONMAN World Champs in Nice and the next IRONMAN World Champs in Kona, with very little news coming out of race organisers or brands or anything. We have heard some rumours about various things that are going to be launched at Kona, but we can't tell you about those yet, so you just have to hold your breath and wait like the rest of us. In the meantime, though, there's a fair amount of racing happening, which we'll get to in a minute, but we thought we'd take a look at some of the numbers from an IRONMAN World Champs in Nice, because Triathlete together with Slow Twitch have released the bike count numbers. Now, this is something that they do every year. Traditionally, they've done it every year in Kona. Some industry folk and media folk sit on the side of the bike check-in and literally count every single bike and what people have on it, what components, what wheels, what aero bars, etc. And it makes for some pretty interesting reading every year. So the women's Nice count is in, and I'm going to run through each category quickly just so that you can get an idea of what's been happening. Obviously, we don't have the Kona numbers to compare it to just yet. That will come, but at the moment, let's just run through what we saw in Nice. Firstly, with the bikes themselves, last year, Canyon was on top in Nice, which is something that hadn't been seen for many years. Cervelo had always topped the count. That was attributed mostly to the fact that it was in Europe, and Canyon was a much bigger brand in Europe. But this year in Europe, Cervelo was back on top. In fact, Cervelo was on top last year in the women's race in Kona by a whopping 10%, and they were only on top here in Nice about 2%, ahead of Trek with 15%, Canyon with 13.8%, and then you get Quintana Roo, Specialized, Liv, BMC, and Felt sharing pretty much the rest of the bikes. So that's interesting reading. I'm not sure what you take from that or why there's less women on Cervelo, but significantly more women than there were men on Cervelo this time last year. When you look at aero bars, profile design, the vast majority. I think that's mostly because profile design comes spec on many, many brands. Interestingly though, 13% of the women in Nice were riding on drop bars only. This compared to last year's men, where 8% of the men competing in their World Champs in Nice were on drop bars only, and compared to Kona last year for the women, where only 1% were on drop bars only. So clearly the course making that decision a little bit easier for the women. A lot of them are going for road bikes. And then the components, overwhelmingly, Shimano getting nearly 77% of the share, SRAM taking pretty much the rest, with Rotor and FSA squeaking onto a few bikes. On the wheels, interesting enough, women last year in Kona rode mostly Zip, with the Zip taking the wheel count with 18%, DT Swiss only 9%, whereas that has completely flipped, with DT Swiss taking nearly 23% of the wheels that the women were riding in Nice, Zip only taking 16.2%. Not sure, again, the reasons for that. Power meters, Garmin taking 28.5%, Asioma taking nearly 28%, Quark taking 19.75%, Stages, 4Rs and Rotor taking pretty much the rest of those. There's a few other SRM, etc. Pedals, Shimano 30.5%, which actually is lower than I would have predicted. Look taking 26.1%, which is higher than I would have predicted. Garmin, Asioma, Speedplay and PowerTap making up pretty much the rest of those. Saddles, a large percentage, 33.5% of the women on those ISM saddles, which my wife actually rides. Women find them far more comfortable. Celitalia, 18.7%, Specialized, 15.4%, and Bontrager, 7.85%. It's very interesting reading all these numbers because the shifts compared to Kona are quite dramatic, and some of it is brands getting a bigger share of the market as they grow and develop, but some of it's just pure choices on what's available for the specific course. So it'll be very interesting to see the men's numbers in a month's time and see how those compare to last year, the women's numbers in Kona, but also the men's numbers in Nice last year. We'll be watching closely when that does come out. Big thank you to Triathlete Magazine and Slow Twitch for putting that together, and of course all the industry folk that sit there and actually count them on the day. It is very interesting for us in the triathlon world. And it's competition time. You can win one of 3 pairs of these, the ON Cloudboom Echo 3s. Not these ones, because these are mine for an in, but one of 3 pairs of your own in your own size. Click the link down below this video to enter the competition. Now the competition runs from today until the 11th of October, with a winners being announced in the GTN Show on the 15th of October. Terms and conditions do apply, so check down below for those T's and C's. First, World Triathlon Championship Series in Weihai in China. The first time there's been a World Triathlon Championship Series race in China since 2011, when the grand final was in Beijing. And finally, we had a course that wasn't completely flat. In fact, it was quite a punchy bike course for the 8 laps on the bike, and that kind of separated the field, which is great to see. More hard courses, please. Alex Yee was the favourite going into it, obviously with an Olympic gold medal around his neck. And he actually started off in fine form. He came out of the water only 8 seconds behind Matt Hauser, with Hayden Wild, his kind of nemesis, a further 8 seconds behind him. And that 8 seconds proved significant, because it meant Alex Yee was in the lead pack of 11 and Hayden Wild wasn't. And that gap went out and out and out until it was nearly 90 seconds by the end of the bike, which meant Alex Yee was not running against Hayden Wild. In fact, he wasn't really running against anyone. He ran away with the win by 46 seconds. Leo Berger was second, Miguel Hidalgo in third, and Hayden Wild ran his way up into 7th place on that side. It means that Alex Yee has a perfect record so far, a perfect 3,000 points for the series going into the grand final, which happens in Torremolinos in Andalusia. That's between Malaga and Marbella on the south coast of Spain, which happens next month. So Alex Yee is in the prime seat to win the World Championship Triathlon Series, although he was previously in a similar position and he managed to come 30th in the final and lose it. So it's not all signed and sealed just yet, but I think the smart money is on Alex Yee to take that title. Meanwhile, in the women's race, Lisa Tersch from Germany took her first ever World Triathlon Championship Series win. She led out the swim and then kind of stayed in the pack for the bike, and then surged on the very first lap of the run to take a 12-second lead after 1 lap of a 4-lap run, which is a very hard way to win a race. But she hung on to that lead all the way to the finish, beating Beth Potter into second with Georgia Taylor-Brown in third. That means in the standings going into the final, going into the grand final, Cassandra Burgard is at the top of the standings for the women, Beth Potter in second, and Lisa Tersch now finds herself in third, but there are not many points between those 3 women, so it's pretty much anyone's title at this point. If Lisa Tersch puts another performance like that in, she will probably take the title at the end of the year. Meanwhile, on the men's side, as I say, Alex Yee is leading ahead of Leo Berger with Hayden Wild in third, and to be honest, Alex Yee would have to do something really wrong to not take the Championship Series title this year. And then stepping up a distance to the T100 in Ibiza this past weekend, which was only 6 days after the IRONMAN World Champs for the women, and definitely did see some casualties from that. Marjolaine Pierre did pull out in the last minute. Also, Laura Philipp also went to Ibiza to support, but didn't actually start the race. Definitely give them both a pass on that front. Lucy Charles-Barkley, also who pulled out of Nice, was not yet ready to race this one either, so she was also out, but still an absolutely cracking race with an absolutely cracking field. Just before the race actually happened, interestingly enough, the PTO announced that they were going to change the rules for drafting penalties, and instead of the normal 3 or 5 or 4 minutes as you see at all the other long distance races, they reduced it down to just 1 minute, and that meant perhaps they were more likely to give them out, and that's exactly what happened. So in the men's race, Alistair Brownlee was the first person ever in a T100 to get a drafting penalty. He was pretty wry about it afterwards. He said it was probably a fair decision, and that he had to push the limits quite a lot. He was riding with his head down, not really looking at the gap or where he was going, and that was when he got the blue card, so he got the penalty, served his 1 minute, and still managed to run his way up to 4th place. So solid day out, and he was pretty happy with it, and it was good to see him back actually racing, not struggling with injury. Ahead of him, though, it was real racing between Martin van Riel and Sam Ledlow, and Martin van Riel proved his mettle in the T100. It seems to be his perfect distance. He is now 2 for 2 for T100s, having won both of the ones that he's started at. He finished just ahead of Sam Ledlow in 2nd, with Mika Nert in 3rd, as I said, Alistair Brownlee in 4th, and Frederick Funk in 5th. On the women's side, it was all the Taylor Knibb show. She was in a class of her own, rode a 1 hour 56:29 bike split, which was 3 minutes ahead of the next fastest biker. Julie Derrin was the 2nd person in T100 history to get a drafting penalty. She also had to serve a minute in the sin bin for pushing the limits and getting too close. They did have race rangers, so I guess the referees had some help making those calls. Also, she didn't have anything negative to say about it. She did run her way back into 2nd place, though, behind Taylor Knibb, but it was Taylor Knibb's race to lose. She was a class above, wasn't really even threatened. Julie Derrin in 2nd with a phenomenal run, running nearly 4 minutes faster than Taylor Knibb. Not enough to actually catch her, but still a very fast run. India Lee put her niece disappointment to bed with a 3rd place there. Ashley Gentle did a very solid run after coming off the bike almost 8 minutes down, or 9 minutes down, to run her way up into 4th, and Paula Findlay in 5th. Interestingly, there was a ruling, because they've cancelled the final event and moved the final to Dubai, so there's only a 7-event series instead of an 8-event series. The ruling was that if you were doing the Olympics and focusing on the Olympics, such as a Flora Duffy, a Taylor Knibb, a Taylor Spivey, you could count 2 races, and your 3rd points would be the average of those 2 races, so that you had 3 points scores going into the grand final. However, there was a little clause in that, which no one was aware of, I don't think. It took a few people by surprise. Perhaps the athletes were aware of it, but we certainly weren't. That it doesn't count if you've done a T100. So Taylor Knibb and Martin van Riel, who both did the Olympics and arguably should get that pass, now find that they have to score more points at the T100 in Lake Las Vegas if they're going to be in the running for the final, because they can't take the average of the 2 that they've done so far and say that they went to the Olympics, because they did the first race, each of them, before the Olympics. But Martin van Riel does still have the chance to actually have the absolute maximum points. He's got 35 points from both of the 2 that he's done. He could get another 35 points in Lake Las Vegas and have 105 points going into the grand final, and he'll be a hard man to beat. In fact, he might be a hard man to beat anyway, because I'm not sure how you beat that when he's swimming a 24:46, biking a 1:47.29, and running a 57:45. He is literally the all-round package that I'm not sure how you figure out how to beat him. So it'll be interesting to see, though. Lake Las Vegas coming up soon. And then the grand final, as we've said, in Dubai in next month. Then stepping up a distance again, there was Ironman Chattanooga. Ironman Chattanooga actually was a swimless event. They cancelled the swim because of Hurricane Helene barreling through, and the swim was they were just not able to have it. That meant a time trial start, which is difficult. It essentially means the whole race is a time trial, because the athletes roll off at 30-second intervals, which means technically someone could start 10 minutes behind you and they could finish behind you but still beat you, which is exactly what happened, because Sam Long had a solid bike and a solid run, crossed the line, breaking the tape first, but he didn't actually know whether he had won yet, because there were still athletes who had started behind him at the start line who were still out on the course, and no one could tell whether they were far enough away or close enough that they had beaten him. It turned out that there was 20 seconds in it, which is absolutely brutal. Cody Beals finished with a 2:38.29 run to Sam Long's 2:40.22 run, but he was 20 seconds shy of taking that win. Sam Long taking the win in 6 hours 32.11, and Cody Beals in 6 hours 32 and 31 seconds. And of course, they weren't actually running 20 seconds apart because of those splits, so they couldn't see each other. If they could have seen each other, maybe would have seen someone surging to close that 20-second gap. But as it was, they couldn't actually race. It was just a time trial format, and they both just had to leave it all out there. Sam Long taking the win ahead of Cody Beals with Andreas Drietz in third. Jackson Laundry, who had the fastest bike split of the day, coming in fourth, and Michael Weiss in fifth. On the women's side, Steph Klatterbach led from the start with the fastest bike split. She went out one of the first races going out there, had the fastest bike split, was leading on the run until Sarah True came past her. And they've actually got a bit of history there, because Sarah True was Steph Klatterbach's mentor in the Zwift Triathlon Academy last year, and helped her as she raced Kona as an age grouper in the Zwift Triathlon Academy. And now Stephanie Klatterbach has turned pro, and they were racing head-to-head for the win here. Sarah True did get the better of Steph Klatterbach on the run. Stephanie finishing second, Anne-Marie Strelo in third, Hayley Chura in fourth, and Daniel Fatou in fifth. And finally, we had the XTERRA World Championships. This used to happen in Maui, now happens in Italy. Arthur Ceres from France taking the win there ahead of Felix Faurissia, with Jens Emil Sloth-Nielsen from Denmark in third. On the women's side, Solène Bion from France taking the win. Both of those winners, by the way, win it for a third straight row. So they've won it 3 years in a row, each of them. Sandra Mayhofer from Italy in second, and Loane Duvison from the Czech Republic in third. Now it's time for Try Spy. Last week we had this cheesy grin, which got some of you. Sebastian Austin said, the Joker without makeup. Well, I'm not sure she'll be too happy to hear you say that. Nehilim ZA said India Lee. James Domini said Max Newman. George Gasco said, I spy with my little India Lee. It wasn't India Lee. Nathaniel Young was the first one to get it right when he said Cat Matt. That's right, it's Kat Matthews and her cheesy grin, which is what Madeleine Smith said. Michael Inneman also said the same thing. Kelsey Jane, Ben Banku Tip, Thomas Ray, and Joel Lyles, and there were a few others. We definitely made that way too easier, so we're going to have to make it significantly harder. So we picked this one. Can you tell me whose ear that is? Say what? Okay, picked out this comment under one of our videos, and it's controversial, I would say. Even Nano said, I have a topic for your try to disagree section, or I'll say what section. Having Lucy and Anne out of the race has taken away the most likely number 1 and 2 of the podium in the World Championships. While this doesn't take away Laura's incredible performance, it does kind of leave a bad aftertaste. Is it as good of a champion if the best in the world are out of the race? I feel if I'd be in Laura's shoes, I'd be asking myself, am I really the best in the world now, or did I get lucky that the biggest competition was out? What if the 10 best triathletes are out for different reasons? Wouldn't the 11th person be crowned the champion feel that they aren't truly the champion of that field, as that field wasn't as stacked as it had the potential to be? Well, I mean, that is a very controversial take on that. You can only beat the people who show up on race day. And I think Laura Philipp is very much a deserving Ironman World Champion. She beat everyone who was there and beat them quite well. So she definitely deserves to have that crown. And I think you can't take anything away from her performance because other people weren't there. I think it is very disappointing, of course, that Anne Haug was unfortunately taken out. And yes, we did have Danielle Reef retiring early in the year as she struggled with some injuries and health concerns. And we had Lucy Charles Barkley also getting a little injury concern, taking herself out of it. So it does feel like we didn't necessarily have the entire field, all the world's best triathletes there on that day. However, that's always the case. There's always going to be races where not everybody shows up. Some years, everybody seems to show up at the absolute peak, and some years, not everybody does. But the winner is still the winner. All you can do is get there and do your absolute best and win the race, which is what Laura Philipp did, and she is very much a deserving champion. However, it does open up a bit more of a discussion, which might be worth going into in a bit more depth, and that is there too much racing now for the long-distance athletes? Because in previous years, there was a big breath before Kona where there was not much racing after, say, July, maybe even early August, before the Ironman World Champs that happened in October, and then maybe a month later, 70.3 World Champs. Sometimes 70.3 World Champs happened in 6 to 8 weeks before Kona, but seldom was there any major races happening in that time. Now, you seem to have the T100 every month, plus these major Ironman events happening with the Pro Series. People are racing just more, and I think possibly we're going to see some more injuries happening. We're going to see more people being sidelined for the big ones as they try and get as much as they can out of the not so big but pretty big races happening earlier in the year. Yet to be seen what kind of field lines up in the men's race in Kona next month, but it could also have a similar effect where there are just not as many men there because they've all been off traveling the world, racing T100 events and Ironman Pro Series events, trying to get all those points for the whole series, and just don't show up on the Ironman World Champs Day. I'm not sure you can in any way criticize Laura Philipp or anyone else who turned up and had a result at the Ironman World Champs. However, it probably is time that the entire world of triathlon got together and sorted out the triathlon calendar. And before we go, a little bit of news that we tease in. GTN is launching YouTube memberships where we have special bonuses, perks and discounts for our GTN members. All the details are coming soon. I can't tell you much more than that right now, but watch this space because we'll be launching that very soon. If you're looking for something to watch right now, last week, Mark went into the lab to see how accurate his VO2 max that his Coros watch gave him was by doing an actual VO2 max test and suffering in the lab. And then I went into the lab and suffered myself for a video coming out this coming weekend where I went to the new Precision Fuel and Hydration Performance Lab, and they cranked the temperature up to 38 degrees and then made me ride at my FTP. Plenty of suffering ensued. It's going to be an interesting video, and even if you don't find it interesting, you can enjoy watching Mark and myself suffer in the name of science. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again next week.